We continue now at the top of Daf Peheyam Aleph and Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 85a. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought the Mishnah which says that a person is allowed to use a needle to take out a splinter on Shabbos, and the Gemara asked, why is that okay? Maybe the person is going to wound himself, and that would be a shigagat skila. It would be he's doing it by mistake, but if he would have done it on purpose, that would be an issue that is an issue of skila, and so why is that allowed? And the Gemara said it's not a problem because mekalkel b'chabura is pater. When a person makes a wound, but it's destructive, so it's pater, so it's not a problem. But the Gemara asks, what about according to the one who says mekalkel b'chabura is chayiv? And the Gemara says to that happens to be the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon anyhow holds pater in that case because Rabbi Shimon ha'amar, because again Rabbi Shimon he says kol malacha she'ein tzricha legufa. Anytime you have a malacha that's not tzricha legufa, it's not for that itself, pater Allah, you're pater on that. So in this situation, you're not doing it for the purpose of the wound. The purpose over here again is to get out the splinter. It's considered a malacha she'ein tzricha legufa, and therefore we say pater, and that was explained as well in Rashi on the previous summit. And the Gemara continues, Boy minei Rav Sheshes, they asked Rav Sheshes the following question. Ben ma'u sheyasa shliach lo'aviv lahakoso u'lakalalo. Can a son be a shliach bezdin? Let's say his father is chayiv, either he's chayiv nidui, he's going to be put into chayrim, or he's chayiv malchus. So is the son allowed to be the shliach bezdin, either to strike the father, to give the father the malchus, or is he allowed to curse his father if that's a part of the nidui? And the Gemara continues, Amar Lei said to him, V'acher mihitiro, but somebody else, is someone else allowed to strike his friend? Is someone else allowed to curse his friend? Of course not. Ela kvod shamayim adif, but rather, it's more important, kvod shamayim, to act as a shliach bezin is considered more important, and it overrides the general isser of striking and cursing. And so hachanami, so here also, kvod shamayim adif, the kvod shamayim, the honor of heaven is more important, and therefore even a son, it would be allowed for him to be a shliach bezin to carry this out against his father. Rashi explains, Ma'u sheyasa shliach bezin lo'aviv im nischayev aviv nidoy malchus, and the Gemara then said, V'acher mihitiro, again, can he be a shliach bezin if his father is chayev nidoy malchus? And the Gemara said, but who else would be allowed to do that? Would someone else be allowed, l'kalulo, u'lahakos es chavero, to curse or to strike his friend? V'halo kol Yisrael huzro ala kos chavereim, but isn't all of Klal Yisrael warned against striking one another? V'al kilalosam, or cursing? But afilu achin nasa shliach bezin l'kach, nevertheless, the person can be a shliach bezin. It says in the pasuk Arboim Yakenu, that's the reference to Malchus. Yiten Hashem Oscha, that's the reference to cursing. And so therefore again, Kavod Shamayim is Adif, therefore Rav Sheshes says that it is okay. And the Gemara continues, Meisve, we have a question on this from the following Brisa. Uma misha mitzvah lahakoso, mitzvah shelo lahakoso. If by someone where it is a mitzvah to strike him, it's a mitzvah not to strike him. Misha eino mitzvah lahakoso. So someone who it's not a mitzvah to strike him, eino din she mitzvah shelo lahakoso. Doesn't it make sense to say that it is a mitzvah not to strike him? All of this will be explained. The Gemara first says, my lav is it not? Idi v'idi b'makom mitzvah. That the Brisa over here is talking, both lines in the Brisa are talking about in a situation of a mitzvah. We're talking about a situation where it's the bezdin that's carrying this out, and habivno haba'acher, and one line in the Brisa is talking about his son, and the other is talking about a regular person, meaning to say, the Brisa seems to be saying, not like Rav Sheshes, that a son is not allowed to carry this out. Rashi explains, Umami mitzvah lahakoso brisa tanya hachi b'mechilta. This is a brisa in the Mechilta, and the Gemara initially says, my lav idi v'idi mitzvah ve'ena mitzvah tarvayu b'makom mitzvah. Both of them are in a situation of mitzvah. V'habiv no v'habacher. One's by his son and one's by someone else. V'hachi kamar. And what it's saying is as follows: V'yolif azhara l'ma'akeyaviv. We're learning here a warning for striking one's father, and we're saying as follows: Uma'acher shemitzvah lahakoso b'makom mitzvah. If somebody else, where it is a mitzvah to strike him in a situation of a mitzvah, d'chsiv yakenu, for example, where it says yakenu, meaning where he's acting as an agent of the court, but mitzvah shelo lahakoso yoser me'ar boim. What the Brisa is saying is, somebody who is allowed to be an agent of the court to strike the person, but he's not allowed to strike him more than 40 lashes. D'chsiv, like it's written in the pasuk, velo Yosef, pan Yosef, that's what it says. So beno, so by his son, she'eno mitzvah lahakoso, afilu b'makom mitzvah, the son who's not allowed to strike his father, even in a situation where he's a shliach of bezdin. And the point is, alma eino nasa shliach lekach. So you see, if that's how you understand the Brisa, that's exactly what the Brisa is saying, that the son is not allowed to be an agent of bezdin to strike his father. Eino din shemuzar shelo lakoso shelo b'makom mitzvah. So of course he can't strike his father in a situation where it's not a mitzvah. That's the Gemara's initial understanding of this Brisa, and that goes against what Rav Sheshes said. And the Gemara continues and says, Lo no, idi v'idi, loshna beno v'loshna acher. Really, both of them, what the Bryce is talking, it doesn't matter his son or somebody else. Velokash, it's not difficult in terms of the interpretation of the Bryce. Kan b'makom mitzvah, kan shalo b'makom mitzvah. In one place we're talking where it is a mitzvah, in one place where it is not a mitzvah. V'hachi katani, and this is what the Bryce is saying. Uma b'makom mitzvah, she mitzvah lahakoso, mitzvah shalo lahakoso. If in a situation of a mitzvah where you're supposed to strike him, it's a mitzvah not to strike. So shalo b'makom mitzvah, in a place where it's not a mitzvah, she'eino mitzvah lahakoso, where it's not a mitzvah to strike him, eino din she mitzvah shalo lahakoso. Doesn't it make sense to say that again it's a mitzvah not to strike him? And Rashi explains, Uma b'makom mitzvah she mitzvah lahakoso, mitzvah shalo lahakoso yoser me'ar boim. The Bryce is simply saying, in a situation where you're supposed to strike him, you're supposed to be an agent of the court, but you can't do more than 40 lashes. So shalo b'makom mitzvah lo kal shekain. The Bryce simply means in a situation where it's not a mitzvah, of course you can't strike. Of course a person cannot strike his friend. And according to this understanding, the Bryce is simply learning out a warning for striking one's father or for striking one's friend. In both situations there's a prohibition, and that's what the Bryce is learning out. It has nothing to do with what Rav Sheshes said. It could very well be that a son is able to act as an agent of the court. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come in here, the following proof from a Braisa, Hayotze lehareg, if somebody is being brought out to be killed by the court, Uva beno v'yiko v'kilalo, and let's say his son comes and strikes him or curses him, Chayiv, he is going to be Chayiv, he will be liable. Ba'acher v'yiko v'kilalo, but if somebody else comes and strikes him and curses him, so Pater, so that person is going to be exempt. And the Gemara says, "V'havinon ban." We asked on this brayso, "Ma'ishna beno, ma'ishna acher." What's the difference by his son, where we're saying that his son is liable, but somebody else is not liable? What's the difference? V'yamar Rav Chisda said on that, "B'misarvin bo lotzeis ve'eno yotze." The case over here is that he's refusing to go out, and therefore he needs to be compelled. His father needs to be compelled to go out. And Rashi explains, "Ve'eno yotze v'ashmeinon," and it's teaching us exactly this issue. D'veno eino nasa shliach bezin lachofo lotzeis, that his son is not able to be an agent of the court to force his father to go out and be killed, whereas somebody else can be an agent of the court. The kasha Rav Sheshes, and that's a difficulty against Rav Sheshes, because again, Rav Sheshes said it doesn't matter. His son is allowed to be an agent of the court, and apparently the Brisa is saying that if the son, if he's an agent of the court, he's chayiv, he's liable, because he's not allowed to be an agent of the court, but somebody else is. And the Gemara continues and answers for Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes muki law b'she'ein misarvin bo lotzes. Rav Sheshes will say that here we're talking about a situation where it's not where they have to compel him to go out. He is going out on his own. And so again, the Bryce is making this distinction between the son who is liable and someone else who is not liable. And so the Gemara continues and asks, if so, acher nami, by another person also, he should be liable. What business does this person have getting involved, striking the father? What business does he have cursing the father? The court is taking care of it, and he's not refusing the court doesn't have to compel, so everybody should be liable, whether it's the person's son or whether it's someone else. And the Gemara answers to that, acher gavra katilahu, by somebody else, this person anyway he's going to be killed. And the point of the Gemara is that we're talking here about monetary compensation in terms of striking the father. So if somebody else who's not the son strikes this person, strikes the father, so then there is no monetary value anyway to the father because he's being brought out to be killed. But if the son is the one that strikes him, so there he's liable to the death penalty in that situation, and so therefore it doesn't matter that he's not worth anything. That's why the son is chayiv. But the Gemara continues, V'amar Rav Sheshes, but didn't Rav Sheshes say, Baisho Yoshin V'meis? Let's say a person embarrasses somebody else while that person is sleeping, and then the person dies. So the person himself didn't suffer any embarrassment. He was sleeping while it occurred, and then he died. So is there any monetary payment? Rav Sheshes says, yes, chayiv, he's liable to pay a monetary payment. And Rashi explains, V'amar Rav Sheshes, Baisho Yoshin V'meis Chayiv, Baisho Yoshin V'meis Toch Sheina. So again, he dies while he's sleeping. Chayiv, Dham is Baishin Bonav. The reason why he's chayiv is because his sons have some embarrassment. V'hainabi loshna, it's no different over here, meaning to say the person's family is going to suffer some embarrassment over here, and so there is a certain monetary payment. So you can't simply answer that he's a gavra katila and that's why this other person is pater because he's not worth anything. It's not true. There is going to be a monetary payment. And so the Gemara continues and answers, Hacha b'mayaskin, and here what are we talking about? B'shiko haka she'ein bashav a pruta. He struck him, and the value of that strike, it wasn't worth a pruta, and so that could answer that question, because the person who struck him who's not the son, so he's not going to be liable for any monetary payment because it wasn't even something that added up to a pruta, whereas the son, when he strikes, so again, he's liable to the death penalty in such a situation. But the Gemara continues, Vam Rabbi Yami, Am Rabbi Yochanan, but didn't Rabbi Yami say that Rabbi Yochanan said, Hikoa Hakosha Ein Bashav Pruta Loka, that there is a punishment. If a person strikes another person and it's a Hakosha Ein Bashav Pruta, it's not worth a pruta, so the punishment is Malkus. And so if the punishment is Malkus, that Acher, that other person also, he should get Malkus. And the Gemara says to that, my potter, the Kamar, well, what do we mean when we say potter? Potter mimaman. It means he's potter from the monetary payment, but he would indeed get malchus. But the Gemara says you can't say that because mechlal devno chayiv b'maman. That would imply that the son is chayiv, is liable to pay the monetary payment. That, of course, is not true. And so ela bedino. So you have to say, obviously, the son is chayiv in his own law, whatever the law is for the son, which is a death penalty. So hachanami bedino. So too over here, he should get the punishment that fits the crime in this situation for this person, which would be malchus. So that's not a good answer. And so the Gemara instead says, ela acher hainu taima de potter. Rather, the reason why if someone else does it, someone who is not the son does it, the reason why he's potter, the yomar krutz, because the pasuk says, v'nasi ba'amcha lo sar, it says you can't curse, and it uses the word bi'amcha in your nation, and we understand that to mean ba'osa maisa amcha. It's somebody who's doing the deeds of your nation, somebody who's acting properly, and this father, obviously, if he's being brought to be killed by the court, he's obviously not acting properly, and so therefore the isser of cursing does not apply. But the Gemara continues, hatenach klala. Now that explains cursing, but hakaminolin. But what about striking, which is also mentioned over here in the Brisa? And the Gemara says to that, makshinan hakala klala. There's a comparison between hakah and klala. We compare the two, and so this idea of osa maisa amcha applies to striking as well. Rashi explains makshinan kolomar gamrinam v'mamatzinu. Rashi's first explanation is it's not a real hekesh. A hekesh is when they're together. There's one right next to the other in the psukim. It's just a mamatzinu, just like we find by klala, it's osa maisa amcha. So too by hakah, we say osa maisa amcha. And Rashi then says, v'iko di'amri, some say hakesha, it is a hekesh, it's a comparison. T'chsiv ma'ake aviv u'mekal aviv gabe hadodi be'el ha'mishpatim. Because ma'ake aviv and mekal aviv, they are near each other in Parshas Mishpatim. Ela shemikra echon mafsik bein time, but there's one pasuk between them, but we could say that that's close enough that that's considered to be a hekesh. And so in any case, that's the reason why both by cursing and by striking, since this is not an individual who's osa maisa amcha, that's why we say an acher, a different person, is going to be potter. But the Gemara continues, if so, if that's the case, so beno nami, by his son also we should say that the son is exempt because he's not osa maisa amcha. Rashi explains, beno nami d'haloksiv asar b'mekal alaviv ela b'mekal chaveru. There's no warning by mekal alaviv by cursing one's father. The warning is just in general by cursing someone sha'aviv b'chlal amcha, because the father also is considered to be part of the nation, as part of amcha, and so therefore we should say the same exact thing by the son, that he's also exempt. And the Gemara says to that, K'diyam Pinchas, it's like Pinchas said, B'shasa tshuva, in a different context, Pinchas said, we're talking where the person did teshuva, Hachanami b'shasa tshuva, so too over here, this father did teshuva, and that's why there is a liability. But of course, then the Gemara says, if so, Acharnami, then someone else should also be liable, because the person did teshuva. And the Gemara continues and says, Amar Rav Mari says, B'yamcha, what does it mean, B'yamcha? It's a different idea, B'mekuyim sheba'amcha, it means somebody who is going to be kept alive in your nation. Rashi says, B'mekuyim haroy lehiskaim, who's fit to be maintained. Below zesh nigmar dino, not somebody who has a verdict against him. But again, the Gemara says, if that's the case, it doesn't apply. So ihachi b'no nami, if so, his son also, it shouldn't apply to the son, and we should say there's an exemption by the son as well. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Amid Beis.